Hey everyone, now with the last video I had to talk about a lot of negative and depression-inducing issues, but fear not, because now we are back at planning and not for death, but for life. I will assume that I finally found a decent house or apartment someplace not too far from Tokyo, where commute times and costs are still manageable. Now that I sort of settled in, I wanted to exchange a small car for something that's a better match for me in my upcoming plans. Having a car available is key for me, even in Japan and with all the potential issues taken into consideration. The most obvious reason is that due to this cancer of mine and the surgery, as well as the radiation therapy that is still pending, my physical abilities are limited and will never fully recover. Some of my muscles had to be removed, and I won't be able to ever carry or lift heavy stuff with my right arm again. This will affect my ability to go shopping, especially in combination with public transportation. Now, the skin replacements that I received for my right shoulder are more prone to damage and less resistant to tear and wear than the original stuff. In the aftermath of the radiation therapy, I won't be able to carry backpacks anymore, at least not when there's some actual content in there. So only have my left arm to carry bags, but then again I can't use my right arm to fully support myself while in public transportation. So even for daily necessities I will need to rely on my car. Other than that, I also can't backpack my way across the countryside with my physical limitations anymore. A car will allow me to partake in the nightlife of Tokyo and other major cities even when living out in the bins. Public transportation gets shut down early in Japan, so when you need about, let's say, 90 minutes to get home by train, you need to leave a nightclub, arcade or something way before midnight. And in Germany, things only start to get interesting past this point. I won't have any problems with intoxication since I'm not into drinking or drugs at all. So getting home with the car is pretty straightforward for me. On top of a car enables you to pick up people and drive them home as well. Nighttime driving within the metropole areas of Japan is actually pretty relaxing from what I've gathered so far. There's not that much traffic anymore and the roads are well lit in general. In Germany, a lot of the street lights are getting dimmed down or even turned off completely at night because of the energy cost. The same applies to most traffic lights, by the way. This results in autobahn drives at high speed, where you need to solely rely on your car's headlights with some construction sites popping out of nowhere. It's like wading through a black hole, and this is within the Ruhr metropole area, not some rural area. Now, of course, it's not like all roads across the whole of Japan are well lit, but it's at least the ones with high speed limits are, and this is what counts, since there you will have less time to react if something unexpected happens. The reason why I didn't go directly for a car that really sparks my interest is that it will probably require mobility itself. I might have to travel the Kanto region a few times to find what I'm looking for, maybe even beyond to, let's say, Nagoya or Osaka. We will stick to the used market as I won't be able to afford a brand new car. Now we all know there will be an inexperienced driver fresh out of driving school. The traffic situation in Japan is challenging, and in the metropole areas you have a seemingly unlimited number of cars on the road, with less road signs or lights present than in Europe. And even in urban areas you are confronted with steep in- and declines. Most roads are very narrow, as are the parking spaces. There are no sidewalks most of the time once you leave the main roads, so you always need to be very cautious since there's a lot of people walking on the streets and residential areas. Motorbikes and bicycles are also a common sight, but not to the extent of other Asian countries or even the Netherlands. The reason behind this little detour is that I want to narrow down the possible choices regarding cars, so I need something that's not too big. And with that in mind, station wagons, SUVs, vans and the like are already out of the game, especially since I'm planning to drive into Tokyo and other major cities on a regular basis. So I'm looking at a coupe, one of the smaller sedans, maybe hatchback. Convertibles aren't that interesting as I don't want to drive open top anyway, and even with a hard top it's just another weak spot to watch out for. Other than most parts of the world, in Japan there are a lot of mini vehicles and so-called K-Cars on the road. Well, cars like this were also common in Europe during the 50s and 60s, especially in France and Italy. In Japan they are still a thing, They are lightweight and small, powered either by an ordinary 660cc or an electrical engine, according to the most recent government regulations. Two different taxes in particular, one for the overall weight of the vehicle, the other depending on engine displacement, in combination with the apparent lack of space, are responsible for the ongoing popularity in Japan. And to be able to buy and drive a car in Japan, you need to provide your own permanent parking space. In the countryside, K-cars are exempt from this requirement. And now obviously one of these might be the most reasonable choice. But then again, I've been way too reasonable all my life. I want to get a car that looks somewhat fast and sporty while being safe to drive and handle at the same time. A nice sounding engine would be neat too. Right now this looks like a Gran Turismo car of sorts. Due to the undulating nature of Japan, the amount of rain and the plans that I have in mind, a four-wheel drive vehicle would come in handy. Now, with a limited budget, it will get very difficult to find a car that combines both Gran Turismo trademark features and four-wheel drive at the same time. But I guess safety comes first, so I will structure this section accordingly. Another issue that I will have to deal with is that my initial driver license only allows for the use of automatic transmission cars. While this is a bummer of sorts, I think that it can actually help me concentrate on the driving as well as the traffic and the surroundings. Also, I need to keep in mind that my right arm is still impaired and that it will probably never reach 100% again. Falling short of a certain level of recovery will make it impossible for me to handle a manual transmission car anyway. Overall, there's a huge selection of automatic transmission cars available in Japan, but things are getting more difficult. If you're on the lookout for something that's a little more trendy and sports-like, I guess automatic transmissions were rather slow and clunky 30 years ago, and this impression is just waning slowly, despite the improved performance today. And since I don't have a boatload of money, I can't just go for a recent car and be done with it. Older and therefore cheaper vehicles are tough to come by in a configuration I like with automatic transmission as a requirement. While being my favorite Japanese brand, the Honda is the biggest offender here, with only a manual transmission available on the vast majority of their, well, let's call them performance cars. It doesn't matter if you look at the various Type R vehicles or the S2000, no automatic inside. Well, there goes the VTEC and the sound that comes with it. If someone at Honda ever happens to check out this video, please fix this someday. Honda Integra Type R would have been my vehicle of choice, but with my right arm in shambles, I need to look for alternatives. I guess since I will be hanging out in Japan, prioritizing Japanese brands might be a good idea. Now we all know the strong points of Japanese vehicles, and since they finally figured out how to design interiors, that are not just plain boring and uninspired, they are in a really good position, especially when some of the biggest brands in Europe somehow completely forgot about coupes or are trying to make every of their cars look like some kind of truck or even tank. You see, I grew up with design impressions from the 70s to the 90s, and there's not much left of the Giugiaro style that I admire so much. The ever-present aggressiveness that I sort of feel here in Germany in particular is also very apparent in the overall car design, by the way coinciding with the rise of SUVs. And the irony of Volkswagen completely buying out Ital-designed Giugiaro, with Giorgetto Giugiaro himself resigning concurrently just about 2 years ago. Now I should really stop talking about things that I have no clue about. And a long time ago, I stumbled upon a nice video montage featuring a lot of Giugiaro's designs on YouTube. I will put the link in the description, maybe you are interested in it. Initially, I selected a lot of different cars that I wanted to show you right here, but after I gathered all the materials, I kind of noticed that I'm not working for some automotive magazine, and so a lot of the stuff had to go again. I mean, there were some interesting ones, but they mostly consisted of older cars with nice outer appearance, drab interiors, and only a few driving assists. In addition, they required some kind of, let's call it collector's tax, more often than not. And I need to get the most out of every penny I have, hence I can't afford paying a couple €1,000 extra, just because this particular car is old and somewhat rare in a workable condition, while still in need of some additional investments, since there's no decent audio system, no navigation system, no parking camera and whatnot. Last but not least, I guess there was a reason why automatic transmission never gained any popularity back in the day. Overall, it's still a very tough decision, much more difficult and time-consuming than I initially thought. This is probably because no matter my actual choice, it will be my first and last real car. Other people are able to work their way through different vehicles, gaining experience and insights along the way, while I need to sort of hit the nail on the head on the first try. Now let's get down to the ones that are actually left. Subaru Impreza, WRX STI A-Line, automatic transmission, 4-wheel drive, not as big as regular sedans. Looks somewhat sporty, a nice turbocharged boxer engine with 2.5 liters that's capable of outputting 300 horsepower, 249 kilometers an hour top speed, 0 to 100 in 5.5 seconds. Of course, it stands out a lot given the visuals, but as you know, I'm always on the lookout for something that's a bit unique. Now, from what I've heard, this vehicle is easy to drive and allows for some user errors without punishing you right away. I need my car to act as some kind of base camp, and due to the traffic surrounding the cities and the other plans that I have in mind regarding exploration of the countryside and so on, I really do need a good English language navigation system, parking camera and some decent audio system, for when the expected 90 minutes of driving turn into 180 minutes due to traffic jams and whatnot. I really want to cover most of these things with genuine manufacturer's parts, but with a navigation system I'm a bit skeptical. I don't think that you can simply switch the language to English, but maybe the guys at Subaru will be able to provide a different system software while preserving the map data from Japan. I also need a bit of room within the car itself to store some supplies and clothes for when I leave the urban areas for a couple of days. Also, with a sedan like this, it should be possible to sleep in the car if necessary. Due to my illness, I'm used to sleep in a 90-degree position, but since there's a little bit of room between the front and back seats, it should be possible to adjust the seat for a slightly more comfortable setting. Naturally, when talking about Japanese four-wheel drive vehicles, the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution has to be included. Unfortunately, only the Lancer GSR Evolution 10 is a viable option. The previous model, Lancer 7 GTA, is pretty dated regarding the interior, with a lot of the electronic stuff requiring additional investments. The other models are too expensive or simply not available with automatic transmission. Now, while I like the overall shape of the Lancer 10, the front portion looks a bit too aggressive for my liking. That's why I put this one second to the Subaru. The variant I'm looking for is a premium one, since this one has at least some leather on the seats, an upgraded audio system from the get-go, and also a parking camera. Specifications include a turbocharged 2-liter engine capable of 300 horsepower, both top speed at 241 kilometers and 0 to 100 in 5.9 seconds are not as good as with the Subaru, but it's just a slight difference that most likely won't be noticeable in everyday situations. The real issue with this car is that it will be tricky to get a good deal on the variants that I'm looking for, since the premium is a rare sight. In addition to this, some of these variants are actually lacking the rear wing, but this car definitely needs one, at least in my opinion. So in the end, I might need to dish out extra cash to get a genuine part installed with a proper paint job on top. Still cheaper than swapping all the seats, I guess. Most people are in for the performance with this type of vehicles. Interior, seats and other stuff is not that important to the majority of them, I guess. Now I know that both the Subaru as well as the Mitsubishi stray a bit from my vision of a Gran Turismo car, but then again I said I would have to compromise somewhat, and at least some of the shortcomings can be fixed by opting for certain trim levels like the premium variant right here. What's even more difficult than deciding on which sedans to include here is trying the same for coupes. Today most of them seem to be rear-wheel drive vehicles, and as a beginner those command a lot of respect, especially since I'm more into the sporty high horsepower models with strong torque. I'm not interested in any kind of drifting, not on purpose and especially not by accident. Maybe some of you can provide some input on how tricky this will actually be. All of the three coupes that I'm going to present are actually rear-wheel drive, so here we go. I set aside the Nissan Fairlady Z versionismo that I initially selected and went for a Nissan Skyline Coupe instead. This one is called 370 GT and features the same 3.7 liter V6 engine as the Fairlady. It's mostly identical to the Infiniti GS37 that's sold in the United States. There are two interesting versions here. One is the Type SP and the other is just called Type S. The main difference between these two is that the SP has optional pedal shifting in addition to the automatic transmission. Overall, the Skyline Coupe is way more in line with the idea of Gran Turismo than the Fairlady with its sports seats, while the engine is able to put out 333 horsepower. The vehicle is pretty heavy at roughly 1,700 kilograms, so in reality it's not as fast as you might think. It comes down to 0 to 100 in 5.3 seconds, a top speed of about 260 kilometers, with the usual electronic limit for Japan kicking in at 180. I do think that this car in particular looks best with black paint, despite my fondness of white lately. With lighter colors, the silver mini spoiler at the back end of the trunk doesn't look too great. I might replace this one with a wing, to be honest. This would also distract a bit from the kind of boring and massive lower body kit at the back. Let's check out two exotics next. First up is the Jaguar XKR Coupe. Since these cars hail from Great Britain, where the folks also use the wrong side of the road, it's not that difficult to get your hands on a Jaguar with wide steering in Japan. Due to both financial, but even more important visual reasons, I'm only interested in two of the earlier models. Right here we will just look at the one equipped with a 4.2 liter V8 engine, but there's also slightly less powerful 4.0 liter V8 available. The 4.2 V8 boasts 406 horsepower. It's in theory the fastest car in this video with 293 kilometers top speed, but it's limited by Jaguar at 250. 0 to 100 in 5.7 seconds. The engine sounds awesome, by the way. And then I'm really all over the exterior of this car. I think it has what it takes to be regarded as the E-Type of its time, but that's probably just me. The air slits on the engine bonnet add some nice detail that is missing in most of the later models. The interior is maybe a bit heavy on the wood paneling, but overall Gran Turismo is stamped on almost everything on the in and outside of this car. Simply due to the age, the electronic equipment is a bit lacking. The audio system seems to be sufficient for when it's undamaged, but there's no proper navigation system and no parking camera. So I guess the radio would need a replacement to get an all-in-one unit in there. And of course it's a rear-wheel drive vehicle, so it might be somewhat dangerous to drive. The final coupe is the Maserati Coupe 4200 GT Cambiocorsa. This car was designed by Giugiaro himself, by the way. The engine is a 4.2 liter V8. It's by Ferrari, and an improved version of it powers the Ferrari 430. Output is at 390 horsepower, top speed at 282 kilometers, and 0 to 100 in 5.2 seconds. The exterior is quite unique and very good looking. Interior is top notch too, and like with the Jaguar, Gran Turismo is everywhere. Now, I don't like the blue color scheme of this particular car, but it's the only white steering one I was able to find right now. Other than with Jaguar in Italy, it's left steering all the way, so naturally it will be difficult to get a good white steering in Japan. I hope the guy who made the photos for this one is earning a lot of money, because they could very well be part of the official Maserati catalog. Back to the car, the electronic side of things is again lacking, so the same treatment as with the Jaguars would be required. Looking at the progression of vehicles, the next and last candidate must feel like engaging the handbrake at beyond 200 kilometers. Of course, I also spent some time with Street View during the last year, strolling through the streets of Japan. There was one vehicle with a unique backside that I saw quite often, and hence it did catch my interest. I'm usually not into this type of vehicles, so I had to do some research, and it turned out to be a Toyota Prius. Let's have a closer look. Engine-wise, this is a hybrid car with a regular gasoline engine with 1.8 liters displacement and a plug-in electric engine on top. While working together, they are capable of 136 horsepower. Front-wheel drive, by the way, which I regard as the second safest and easiest way to drive. The version I'm looking at is G Touring Selection leather package, mostly for the leather seats, of course. While the car is exceptionally light at about 1,370 kilograms. The actual speed data is still somewhat lacking. Top speed is at 186 kilometers, but 11.2 seconds, 0 to 100, is the thing you will probably notice the most on a daily basis. Then there's another thing that I noticed while looking for some videos on YouTube. This car is automatic, of course, but it's just one gear from 0 to top speed. With that in mind, there's a huge problem. Beginning from about 80 to 85 kilometers, right up to the speed limit. The gasoline engine sounds exactly the same. So you got a huge stretch, a lot of which is within expressway range, where the RPM of the ordinary engine is probably close to the limiter, leaving any further acceleration to the electric engine. You can probably imagine that it actually sounds kind of stressed out at that point. I guess that this can wear you out while on expressways for a couple of hours on end, especially outside the cities where there aren't traffic jams everywhere. There's probably no way to fix this issue. This vehicle more or less a city car. I mean, the size and other visuals don't hint at this though. While I find this vehicle visually acceptable, it's still kind of drab on the outside, and one thing that crossed my mind was turning one of these into an Itasha. Cars are called Itasha when you apply huge anime or manga artworks all over your car. The car might need a different paint job for it to work well, depending on the motive you decide to go for. The whole thing is obscure even in Japan, only present in selected districts of some of Japan's biggest cities. Now in Europe or maybe even the United States, parking a car modified like this in public will result in costly abuse pretty quickly, but I don't think that this will be the case in Japan. I'm not totally set on this yet, in part because I have no clue on the true price point if you want it to actually look good. This isn't something you learn in the do-it-yourself section of some bookstore, and I'm sure there are some specialized workshops for this in Tokyo and a couple of other cities. Now, since this is a pretty small scene, I think there will be some opportunities to get into contact with like-minded people despite me being a foreigner. Might be a very interesting experience diving into something you can only do in Japan. There are regular meetings of like-minded people in Tokyo and other cities, and I think it would be a blast to be part of this small community. While this thing is in fact obscure, it hasn't stopped Toyota from creating some official itashas, using the Prius as a foundation. Some motorsport racing teams from Japan are using artworks like this for their cars in national as well as international events. What I really like about this whole Itasha thing is that it promotes a positive and friendly state of mind. The characters are usually depicted in a way that the Japanese call genki, which roughly translates into being outgoing, lively and energetic. These artworks create, from my point of view, a desperately needed contrast to a lot of the aggressive car designs of today, a rainbow of colors next to all the black and silver. In addition, it's a statement of sorts and tells a lot about your interests and given the right choice of motive, also yourself. With some mainstream anime or manga series, it might not be that noticeable, but there are exceptions to this where at least insiders will be able to get the message. Of course, I will have a hard time getting my own style going, since even regarding anime, my favorites are niche most of the time, not that well known or successful, not even in Japan. As a result, it won't be easy to get high quality source material for the decals. Maybe I should try to contact the respective creators. There might be a slight chance that they would be interested in this project, especially when there aren't that many fans out there for their characters and their story. The most important thing is that it should be looking good in a level of craftsmanship though. During all the hours that I spent digging through cars on sale, I also stumbled across a lot of modified vehicles, other than in Germany, where I would steer clear of everything that has been tampered with. In Japan, the people seem to either leave everything in place or do a good job at modifying their car. I rarely saw amateurish work, which is the default site in Germany. I guess that most car owners go to professional shops for modifications, while in Europe there's a lot of do-it-yourself going on, with varying degrees of success. Now the longer I think about it, the more interesting it seems to follow the Itasha route, not just with Prius, but also with the Subaru, or the others that are showcased. Now with the exotics it seems a little more out of place, but then again I saw a lot of Ferraris, Lamborghinis, etc. With anime and manga artworks. Officially, it's claimed that these decals can be removed without any detrimental effects to the paint, even after years of continuous use. I don't know if it's actually true. Probably depends on the quality of the decals and how well they were fitted in the first place. To be honest, I don't have that much concern about this. We are talking Japan after all. You don't really see much sloppy work over there. Looks like we are done with the cars now. At the start of this video I already talked about that I need a car for daily living, but let's look into the optional things where it will come in handy. The metropolitan areas of Japan are very nice and offer a lifetime worth of exploring and experiences, but what I also want to check out is the actual countryside of Japan. Places where it's difficult to get to with just public transportation alone. So what I've heard is that off the beaten path a lot of beautiful scenery awaits, and given the good quality of the Japanese road system in general, you don't even have to cope with bumpy and muddy backworld roads to be able to get there. Quite a difference to some parts of Germany, I might add. German roads consists of more than just Autobahn, and even these are getting worse every year. As I went to my last MRI, I had to return to the city where I was born once more, and oh boy, the roads there were in a state like they just got hit by an anti-one-way bomb. Countless bumps and potholes. I always wondered how traveling Europe with a horse coach a couple of 100 years ago could be potentially hazardous for your health, even without any crashes, and after a couple of excursions into this city, I finally get it. When outside the metropolitan areas in Japan, it's time to leave the expressways for now, since it's not a good way to enjoy the scenery. Other than in some special cases, I don't want to rush past places anymore. What I had in mind was to get a good camera for my car, so that I can record each and every trip wherever I go. There's a lot of stuff like this on YouTube already, but it's mostly the bustling metropoles. Now, while on these trips, I don't want to be forced to plan everything perfectly ahead of time. Like how far can I go in one day, where do I need to stop for the night, etc. My car needs to be some kind of base camp where I can also sleep if it turns out to be necessary. Situations that would get really problematic as a backpacker, using trains and stuff, are not that much of an issue if you got a car with the right tools on hand. I really want to decelerate in my life in terms of urgency, while increasing my experience intake at the same time. You see, outside of Tokyo and other big cities, there won't be many street signs in English, so taking the wrong turn will happen eventually, even with the best navigation system. I want to get in a state where I don't really care about these things anymore, because it's not about the destination, but the journey itself. Let's say plan for like 3 or 4 days away from home and see where it will take me. Looking for good places to get photos and videos, gathering impressions. I will need to work my way up the ladder, because at first it will wear me down pretty fast as a beginner driver, but I think if I take on things slowly, I will be able to improve. Japan isn't that big of a country, so it's actually possible to get nearly everywhere in a manageable amount of time. If I go with the Subaru or the Mitsubishi, I don't even have to fear Hokkaido in wintertime. My dream is to get as far as Okinawa as some kind of ultimate goal. Of course, it would be easier and quicker just to take a national flight, but that's not really the point. There are ferry transfers that I can take. I always wanted to get to a real beach with nice weather before I go down, and Japan will even allow for that, as it has a couple of interesting climate zones bundled in one single package. The last time I've been to a beach was nearly 30 years ago. There are beaches in Germany, of course, but I don't regard any of them as a real beach. I mean, North Sea is a joke compared to even the Mediterranean, let alone the Indian Ocean or the Pacific. Other people replicate around the world in 80 days with cars, bikes, and some people even on foot. I don't need the world, I will settle with Japan. Aside from deserts, there's not much missing. I'm not really looking for an adventure, because this also implies a certain amount of danger, and I've had enough thrill in my life already, so that's not it. I guess I'm looking for experiences and freedom. I've been confined to this country, city, street, apartment, during some episodes, even just my room for too long, being input deprived for years and years. You see, I don't think that I'm the type of person that everyone thinks I am. I had tons of bad luck and ended up in this situation unwillingly. Everyone thinks that I'm just some boring computer nerd that wants to sit in his room all day for the rest of his life. The truth is that I never had a choice. I was born just like everyone else, but only mere months later my diseases took over, my family fell apart, and everything went downhill constantly from there on. I do think that if I'm able to realize the ideas of mine, that it will turn out to be something really unique and out of the ordinary. Even in Tokyo, there aren't that many Subarus, let alone Itashas, let alone Itasha Subaru driven by some German guy with terminal cancer. and now project this onto the countryside of Japan. Since all this is not in the slightest intimidating, I also hope that this combination will make it easier for me to get into contact with other people over there, that I don't need to work as hard on this, letting my car handle some of it in a positive and unique way. I'm well aware that this will also turn a lot of people away, but if only a couple of those in each town think positive of this, it will be enough for me. I don't need thousands of friends, a few will suffice. Also, it will scare off potential supporters that I will need along the way regarding legal and also financial matters. But as before, due to the, in my opinion, rather modest nature of my goals, I don't need support by thousands of people. A few will suffice. I will stop trying to make everyone happy, switching to authentic mode instead. And maybe this is the way that I've been overlooking all my life. Maybe you need to exhibit some rough edges and spleens to be recognized as a human being. And this is what I want to find out. It's the last stop of my life. This is what I want to find out in Japan.